guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Holly. This is She Reads. Today we're going to be going through my top 5 reads of 2019 as well as my worst 5 reads of 2019. So this is my first year doing a video like this, so let me know in the comments down below if you liked it and if you'd like me to continue doing this and making it a yearly tradition. Without further ado, let's get right on into the video, and we're going to start with my top 5 reads, and I am going to go in order from number 5 to number 1. So number 1 will be the best book that I read in 2019. So right off the bat, I'm going to kind of cheat here, and I was trying to decide whether or not I should do this or not, but then I figured it's my list, so whatever, I'm just going to do it. And I'm kind of wrapping 2 books into one slot, and that is Rachel Hollis's Girl Stop Apologizing and Girl Wash Your Face. I found both of these books to be extremely motivating. I really want to become a girl boss, so I have a lot of things going on right now, and I am trying to improve in that area of my life. I'm trying to make things happen with my writing, with YouTube, with a lot of different things. So she really is so inspiring to me, and if you want to become an entrepreneur, not even necessarily if you want to become an entrepreneur, but if you just want to take control of your own life, I definitely recommend reading her books. You don't have to be female to read them. It applies to anyone. Number 4 is The Secret by Rhonda Byrne, and once again, I listened to this one on audiobook. Rachel Hollis's, I also listened to hers on audiobook as well. And I wasn't sure whether or not I wanted to put this one in the list, simply because I actually watched the documentary first, and the audiobook is really just the audio from the documentary, if that makes sense, which I didn't know. I watched the documentary on Netflix, and it absolutely changed my life. Like, this minute that I watched it, it changed me. And I have been practicing the law of attraction ever since. On my other channel, my lifestyle channel, I talk a lot about the law of attraction over there, and it's bringing in some amazing things into my life. So I wanted to read the book, and I didn't realize that the book really is just the audio for the Netflix documentary. So I wasn't 100% sure if I wanted to include that on here, since technically it was a documentary that changed my life, but I figure I did read it or listen to it, and it changed my life, so I have to put it somewhere on this list, so it makes number 4. The number 3 slot also goes to an audiobook. I listened to a lot of amazing audiobooks this year, and that is One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. And I absolutely loved this book. I loved all the characters. At first, when I first was getting into it, it took me a little while to get into all the characters and to be able to distinguish who they were, but they all had a pretty different voice, and I really enjoyed all of them in their own special way. I thought the premise for the book was really interesting. It's about a bunch of teenagers that all end up in detention, and they're kind of all like, it's almost like Breakfast Club style, where there's like a jock and like the weird girl and like the bad boy, and they all end up in detention together this one afternoon, and one of the classmates ends up dying, and it's looking like one of the students that were in that room was the person to kill this other student. So it kind of goes back and forth from each person's perspective, and as you're reading it, you don't believe any of these characters did this. So you're like going, what the heck, like, who did this? Because you really don't believe any of the characters could have done it. So I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the writing style, and it is my number 3 slot. The number 2 slot and the first physical read on this list goes to This Is Not a Werewolf Story by Sandra Evans. I absolutely loved this book. I read it during Spookathon this year, and it gave me almost Harry Potter vibes. It's about a boy who is a werewolf, maybe? I don't know. He's off at this school, and it is so good. I flew through it. I enjoyed it so much. Like I said, it gave me Harry Potter vibes, but not in the way that it's like trying to copy Harry Potter. It just gave me the same sort of feelings that I felt when I read Harry Potter for the first time. So I absolutely really enjoyed this one. Highly recommend it, and it is the number 2 book that I read this year. And finally, the number 1 book that I read this year that I was absolutely obsessed with, Stephanie Garber's Finale. And I am so in love with this Caraval trilogy. I definitely plan to reread it again sometime soon. But Finale is definitely my favorite book out of all three of them. I loved it so much. I feel like it really wrapped everything up. I loved it so much that I actually went ahead and ordered her Barnes & Noble edition, which had the extra chapter from Legend's perspective. So I actually have 2 copies of this book now. This one is the Barnes & Noble exclusive edition, and then I also have just the regular edition that I bought from Indigo here in Canada, and it's a signed copy. So I was also so excited to have a signed copy from her. She has become one of my new favorite authors. I can't wait to see what she's working on next. I follow her on Instagram, and I know that she is working on a new series. So I'm super, super excited to see what she puts out there. But this series is very close to my heart. I enjoyed it so much. And everything was wrapped up beautifully in this book. So this is the #1 book that I read this year, and if you have not read it, go get it. Read it today. You will not be disappointed. I mean, read it if you've read the other 2 books. If you haven't read the other 2 books, go get Caravel and read that one first. Okay, so now that we have talked about my top 5 reads of the year, let's get into a sadder list, and a list that I feel a little bit bad about making, because I can only imagine when I get my book published, if my book ended up on somebody's worst list, I would feel horrible. So I have very complicated emotions about whether or not I should even be making this list, because it's kind of mean, but it is what it is. Some books we're not going to enjoy as much as others. It doesn't mean that the book is bad or that the author is bad. It just means that the book wasn't for us. So I am going to go ahead and tell you my top 5 books, or worst 5 books of 2019, starting with the 5th worst and ending with the worst. So the 5th book on this list might surprise some of you, because this book has done really well, and it's done really well on BookTube as well. But that is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. And I'm almost thinking that this one possibly is because I listened to it on Audible. So I don't know if maybe if I would have given it a physical read, if that would have changed things for me, because it does seem like a book that I would have liked. But it was very long, and it was very complicated, and it was really hard to remember where you were, because the book goes through several different characters, and you have no idea what's going on. Like, pretty much throughout the whole book, you're just going, what? And you're so confused throughout the entire book, and that just bothered me. I never felt like I was catching on. I never felt like I was up to speed. It's like, you know how some books, when they start in the middle of like a battle or something, and you have no idea what's going on and what led the characters up to this point? It's almost like that. And then once you kind of start getting into it, then you kind of figure out what's been going on to lead them up to this point. Only with this book, you never get there. You just are in the dark the entire time, and you don't know what the heck is happening. So I feel like maybe it was that I wasn't paying close enough attention. So maybe if I would have given it a physical read, it would have been different. But as of right now, it is the 5th worst book that I read this year, unfortunately. The #4 slot belongs to 50 Shades Freed by E.L. James. I read the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy back in February, because I was trying to, I'm like, okay, it's February, it's the month of love, let's get into something racy, something romance. I don't typically read romance or erotica at all. So, but I actually didn't mind the first one, and I really enjoyed the second one. But by the third one, no, I just felt like there was too much of a character shift in Christian Grey. I just felt like he turned from one person, completely different person, and it just wasn't believable. It was so much to the other end that it was not believable at all. And I mean, it was just like some woman's fantasy of just, you know, meeting this amazing, beautiful, rich billionaire and turning him from a playboy into the perfect husband. It's a fantasy. It wasn't believable. It would never happen. So it really just, yeah, I did not like that one at all. And so much so that I don't have the physical copies anymore, because I unhauled them and I no longer own them. So I don't have a book to even show you. The next book is a book that I'm actually kind of surprised that I didn't like, and that is The Dwelling by Susie Maloney. And this book follows 3 different people living in the same haunted house. So it's like a turnover book. So it actually follows 4 people, because it also follows the real estate agent that keeps selling this home. So the real estate agent sells it, and the people that move in have paranormal experiences, end up getting out of the house. it gets sold again, goes through 3 different owners, and you find out about 3 different ghosts in this place. And I did not like it, which is very surprising for me because this is right up my alley. I should have loved this book, but I found it was really hard to get to know this many characters and to really feel like you cared about what happened to them. It goes on so quickly. I mean, this is, how many pages is this book? So it's 400 books with 4 characters. So basically 100 pages per character. So just when you start to feel like you're getting to know these characters and start to care about them, their part of the story is over. And then you have to get to know a new person again. And that's always like the hardest part of a book for me, is in the beginning, is getting to know characters, because it takes me a while to decide whether I like them or not and to really get invested in them. So for this to have such a quick turnover, I did not care about any of the characters. I did not care about what happened to them at all. I didn't find it scary. It was a flop for me, unfortunately. The number 2 slot belongs to Fiend, The Shocking True Story of America's Youngest Serial Killer by Harold Schroeder. And this one, once again, should be a book that would have been right up my alley, but it was not. It is a true crime book regarding Jesse Pomeroy, who was an active serial killer at the age of 14 in 1874. So the beginning of the book, where it talks about his crimes, was very interesting. It was very sad. This was done by a 14-year-old boy, so the crimes that he committed were against younger children, mostly boys. And the fact that I have a son reading it was very, very hard to get through, because obviously you're thinking about your kid, right? It's a whole different ballgame when you're reading stuff like this when you have children. It's a lot different. But it was really interesting, and it was horrifying, and it was true crime. But the second half of the book was almost boring. I said this in my review, but it talked a lot about different news articles at the time. And I guess back in those days, the papers had kind of like community columns where people would write in letters and the newspaper would publish them. So there was all these people writing in letters saying what they thought of the case, because basically the whole last half of the book was whether or not this boy should be put to death for his crimes. And there was such an uproar in the community because half the people in the community felt that he should be held responsible and be put to death, and the other half felt that he shouldn't. So that's almost what it became about. And it was just kind of boring, to be honest with you, because it just said, well, this person thinks this and this person thinks that. And I mean, I don't care what people 100 years ago, what their letters were, whether or not they thought that this should happen. I just want to know the facts. I want to know, was he punished for this? What ended up happening? So I feel like almost half of this book could have really just been omitted and it would have been a faster paced read, that's for sure. And the number 1 slot for the worst books that I read in 2019, it goes to, I'm sure you're not surprised, Tom Schroeder's Old Souls. Georgia and I did a bestie book talk on this a couple of months ago. Neither one of us enjoyed it. We both really, really enjoy the topic of reincarnation, and our bestie book talk became more of a discussion on what we thought our opinions are on the subject matter. I find it to be so fascinating. I find it really interesting, and I personally believe in reincarnation, so I was really excited to find a book that talked about it. But instead of getting a bunch of examples about reincarnation, what I got was almost like a blog of this man traveling all over the place in search of kids who remember their past lives, which is the interesting part. But the part that's not interesting was his descriptions of the land around him, the cities, the towns, the homes that these people lived in. A lot of it was extremely boring. So you take a topic like reincarnation that is so interesting and you somehow turn it boring. I can't relate to that at all. So this one for me, unfortunately, was the worst book that I read this year. Well, you guys, that concludes my list of the best and the worst books that I read in the year 2019. I would love to know in the comments down below what your best and your worst reads were. And let me know if any of your favorites or not favorites made it onto my list. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!